Hey there, welcome to Broderos. Tonight, we've got hours of chilling horror stories combined with soothing rain sounds to help you relax and sleep. Before you drift off, leave a comment below and let us know where you're listening from and what time it is. And don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe right away. If you end up not enjoying it, you can always take it back later. Get cozy and let the fear take over. Bloody trails. I never paid much attention to the rumors that swirled around my city, whispers of dark shadows lurking where they didn't belong. The streets, lined with familiar faces and places, had always felt safe, until now. As I stepped into the coffee shop on the corner of Maple Street, the rich aroma of roasted beans wrapped around me like a warm blanket. This was my refuge, a small slice of normalcy amidst a world that was slowly spiraling out of control. The walls were adorned with local art, vibrant colors splashing against the stark white, each piece telling a story of our community. I settled into my usual spot by the window, the sunlight casting a golden hue over my cup. It was a Sunday morning, and the chatter of patrons filled the air, laughter mingling with the clinking of cups. Everything seemed perfect until it wasn't. As I sipped my coffee, a flicker of movement caught my eye. A figure stood outside, their silhouette cast against the brightness of the day. I squinted, trying to discern who it was, but the sunlight played tricks on my eyes. I shrugged it off, attributing it to my overactive imagination. Suddenly, the bell above the door jingled, and a young woman burst in, her face pale and eyes wide with terror. She rushed to the counter, breathless, her voice trembling as she relayed something that made my heart race. "There's been an accident. Someone was killed." My heart sank as dread seeped into my bones. I set my cup down, trying to piece together her words. As she spoke, I could feel the energy in the room shift. The laughter faded, replaced by gasps and murmurs of disbelief. I strained to listen, desperate for details. "They found him behind the old theater," she continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "They say it was brutal, blood everywhere." The word blood echoed in my mind like a warning bell. I glanced outside again, but the figure was gone. The sunlight no longer felt warm, it seemed to taunt me, illuminating the very shadows I had ignored. Anxiety began to settle in my stomach like a stone. I felt a pull to investigate, an insatiable curiosity that urged me to learn more about this tragedy that had shattered our peace. I left my untouched coffee on the table and stepped into the world outside, feeling the weight of uncertainty press down on me. My city, once a place of comfort, now felt foreign, filled with unseen dangers. As I approached the old theater, the sense of foreboding deepened. The street was eerily quiet, the typical sounds of life muted as if the universe held its breath. I could hear my heartbeat echoing in my ears as I walked past the flickering streetlights, shadows stretching unnaturally across the pavement. I could see the gathering crowd ahead, a mix of curiosity and horror painting their faces. It was here that I felt it, an icy chill creeping down my spine, a whisper of danger hovering in the air. I had to know what happened, but deep down, I could sense that this was only the beginning of something much darker. As I edged closer to the crowd, I caught a glimpse of flashing lights and the somber figures of police officers. The moment I reached the outskirts of the crowd, I froze. A grim realization washed over me. This wasn't just a random act of violence. I could feel it in my bones. I was about to step into a nightmare that would change everything. I took a deep breath and pushed my way through the crowd, my heart pounding in rhythm with the anxious murmurs around me. As I neared the scene, the metallic scent of blood hung in the air, mingling with the fading aroma of morning coffee. My mind raced with questions. Who was the victim? What had happened? And, most disturbingly, why did I feel an inexplicable pull to this tragedy? The police had cordoned off the area, yellow tape fluttering in the gentle breeze like warning flags. The dull thud of footsteps echoed as officers moved methodically, their faces set in grim determination. I caught sight of a few familiar faces in the crowd, fellow residents of our close-knit community, their expressions reflecting a mix of shock and disbelief. Among them, I recognized Mr. Thompson, the elderly man who tended the community garden, his hands trembling as he gripped his cane. He had always been a source of comfort in the neighborhood, and seeing him in distress made my stomach churn. My eyes darted to the theater's entrance, where the shadows seemed to cling to the dilapidated building as if guarding its secrets. The once vibrant marquee was faded and peeling, letters long gone. Now, it stood as a haunting reminder of the darkness that had seeped into our lives. I felt an urge to step closer, to see for myself what lay within those walls. The crowd parted slightly, revealing a group of paramedics wheeling out a gurney covered with a white sheet. My breath caught in my throat. Was this the body of the victim? I averted my gaze, unable to look, but the image burned into my mind. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was witnessing something I was never meant to see. "Did you hear?" "They said it was a murder," whispered a voice beside me. I turned to see a woman in her 30s, her eyes wide with fear. "They found him with his throat cut, right there in the alley." Her hands trembled as she spoke, betraying her shock. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. "Who was he?" I asked, my voice barely more than a whisper. "They say he was just a local guy, someone who used to hang out here." "No one knows why this happened," she replied, glancing nervously at the police. "But I heard rumors about a serial killer, someone who targets our neighborhood." The word sent chills down my spine. A serial killer? It sounded like something out of a horror movie, but the fear in her voice told me this was all too real. My mind raced with possibilities. What if the murderer was still nearby? What if they were watching us, waiting for the next opportunity to strike? Just then, a sudden commotion erupted at the front of the crowd. A man burst forward, shouting incoherently. His disheveled appearance, with wild hair and clothes stained with dirt, made him look like a ghost wandering among the living. "You don't understand," he screamed, eyes wild. "He's not just dead. He's gone. The killer is still out there." The crowd recoiled, gasps echoing as people stepped back from the man. I could feel a palpable tension in the air, a mix of fear and disbelief. Who was this man? Had he witnessed the crime? My instinct screamed at me to approach him, to find out what he knew, but the police were already closing in, attempting to restrain him. The officer's voice boomed over the chaos. "Everyone, please return to your homes. This is a crime scene." The warning felt futile against the rising tide of panic that coursed through the crowd. I stood frozen, my mind swirling with thoughts, unable to tear myself away from the unfolding horror. I felt a strange compulsion to stay, to dig deeper into the shadows that now enveloped my city. Suddenly, I felt a hand on my shoulder. I turned to find Laura, my childhood friend, her face pale. "What's happening?" she asked, her voice trembling. "I heard about the murder on my way here. It's terrifying." "I don't know," I replied, shaking my head. "But I feel like this is just the beginning. Something is wrong with our city, Laura. We need to find out more." As we stood there, the first drops of rain began to fall, each drop a reminder that something dark had invaded our lives. I felt the weight of uncertainty settle on my chest. Would I be able to uncover the truth behind these horrifying events, or was I simply walking into a trap that would ensnare me? With one last glance at the scene before me, I made a silent promise to myself. I wouldn't let fear control me. I would dig deeper, despite the risks. But as I turned to leave, a strange sensation washed over me, an uncanny feeling that someone was watching me. I looked back over my shoulder, scanning the faces in the crowd, but everyone seemed too consumed by their own fears to notice me. That night, as I lay in bed, my mind raced with images of the murder, the wild man, and the whispered rumors of a killer on the loose. Sleep eluded me, each creak of my home amplifying my anxiety. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had unwittingly stepped into a darkness that threatened to consume me whole. I thought about the shadows lurking just outside my window and how easily they could blend into the night. With a heavy heart, I realized this city, once a sanctuary, was transforming into something sinister, something I could no longer ignore. The sun rose the next morning, but its light felt cold and unwelcoming, casting long shadows that danced across my bedroom wall. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, feeling the weight of yesterday's horror pressing down on me. The morning news droned on in the background, a familiar voice delivering updates that I had little desire to hear. Yet I couldn't escape the reality of the situation. My city was gripped by fear, and I could feel it clawing at the edges of my mind. I swung my legs over the side of the bed, my feet hitting the floor with a dull thud. As I prepared for the day, I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror. The reflection staring back was one I barely recognized. Dark circles hung under my eyes, a testament to the restless nights spent tossing and turning, plagued by the visions of the previous evening. I felt like a ghost in my own life, my once vibrant world now painted in shades of gray. After forcing down a breakfast that tasted like cardboard, I decided to head out. I needed to know more, to piece together the fragments of information swirling in my mind. The coffee shop, once a haven, felt like the first step into the abyss. I slipped on my jacket and left the house, the chill of the autumn air wrapping around me like a shroud. The streets were eerily quiet, the usual hustle and bustle of morning life subdued. I made my way toward the coffee shop, each step echoing with uncertainty. When I arrived, the atmosphere was heavy with tension. The barista, usually cheerful, was now wearing a frown that deepened the worry lines on her forehead. She glanced at me, her eyes filled with unspoken fears. "Have you heard any updates?" I asked, attempting to sound casual, but my voice trembled slightly. "Nothing concrete," she replied, her hands busy with the coffee machine, though her gaze remained distant. "People are scared. It's all anyone talks about." I nodded, but inside, my mind was racing. I couldn't just sit back and wait for answers. I decided to visit the old theater, drawn by a force I couldn't understand. Perhaps there were clues left behind, something that could lead me closer to the truth. As I walked the familiar streets, I felt an unsettling awareness of my surroundings. The laughter of children playing, the chatter of neighbors, all felt like an echo of a time before the murder, a time when life felt predictable. Now, each sound seemed amplified, each rustle in the leaves or creak of the pavement igniting a primal fear within me. Upon reaching the theater, I was taken aback by the sight of the police tape still fluttering in the breeze. The alleyway where the body had been found was cordoned off, a grim reminder of the violence that had shattered our community. I scanned the area, searching for any sign of what might have happened. I noticed a small group of reporters gathered at the entrance, their cameras capturing every moment, every whispered rumor. I edged closer, straining to hear their conversations. "Sources say this is the second murder in 2 months," one reporter said, his voice hushed but urgent. The police are investigating a possible connection to the first victim. My heart raced at the implication. How had I not known about a previous murder? My mind raced with questions. Who were these victims? What linked them? I stepped away from the group, feeling a mixture of fear and determination surge through me. Suddenly, a familiar face emerged from the crowd. It was Laura, her expression one of concern as she caught sight of me. "There you are," she exclaimed, rushing over. "I've been looking for you. You shouldn't be here." "I need to understand what's going on," I replied, my voice steady despite the turmoil within. "There's something connecting these murders. I can feel it." Laura glanced nervously at the police presence. "But it's dangerous. What if the killer is still around?" I shook my head, resolute. "I have to know. What if we can find out who it is before they strike again?" Reluctantly, Laura nodded, the fear in her eyes mixing with a determination that mirrored my own. Together, we stepped closer to the alley, the smell of damp earth and decaying leaves filling the air. I could feel the tension coiling within me as we approached the police tape, the barriers separating us from the truth. Just then, a police officer stepped forward, blocking our path. "This area is off limits. You need to leave," he said firmly, his eyes scanning the crowd as if searching for potential threats. I hesitated but then mustered the courage to speak. "Please, we just want to know what happened. We live here. This is our community." The officer softened slightly, but his gaze remained stern. "You should go home. There's nothing for you here." Feeling a mix of frustration and fear, I turned to Laura. "We can't give up. Let's talk to the locals. Someone has to know something." We spent the afternoon wandering the neighborhood, stopping to chat with anyone who seemed willing to share. Most were too scared to talk, their eyes darting around as if expecting the killer to emerge from the shadows. One elderly woman finally recounted a tale that chilled me to the bone. "I saw a figure near the alley the night it happened," she whispered, glancing around as if the walls had ears. "He wore a dark hood, his face hidden. I thought nothing of it, just a passerby, but something about the way he moved, it was wrong." My heart raced. This was the first tangible lead, and I knew we had to follow it. "Did you see where he went?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. I didn't. I was too scared to look closer," she admitted, fear evident in her trembling hands. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, I felt a chill creep up my spine. The shadows seemed to stretch longer, and with the fading light came a new sense of dread. The killer was out there, and I was determined to find him, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was stepping into a darkness I might never escape. The elderly woman's words echoed in my mind as Laura and I walked away from our front porch, the air thick with unspoken fears. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows that seemed to reach out for us. I glanced at Laura, whose face was a mix of concern and determination. "We need to find that figure. If he was near the scene, he might know something." "I agree," she said, her voice steadier than I felt. "But we have to be careful. We don't know what we're dealing with." As darkness settled over the city, the streets transformed. The comforting familiarity of daylight faded, replaced by a sense of impending dread. Streetlights flickered on, illuminating the pavement with pools of yellow light that barely pierced the encroaching shadows. We retraced our steps to the alley where the murder had occurred, the heart of this growing nightmare. "I've never been down this alley at night," Laura admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "It feels different. Everything feels different now, I replied, the weight of the night pressing down on us. Let's just take a look. As we approached the alley entrance, a shiver ran down my spine. The air was thick with an oppressive stillness, the kind that made every small sound, our footsteps, the rustling leaves, seem amplified. I paused, glancing around. Do you feel that? I asked. Laura nodded, her eyes wide. It's like the whole city is holding its breath. We stepped into the alley, the dim light from the street barely illuminating the path ahead. The walls towered over us, looming like silent witnesses to the horror that had unfolded here. I felt a mix of fear and adrenaline pushing me forward, compelling me to uncover the secrets hidden in the darkness. As we ventured deeper, I noticed a faint crimson stain on the ground. My heart raced as I knelt down to inspect it, dread pooling in my stomach. Laura, look, I pointed to the spot, my voice barely a whisper. She crouched beside me, her face paling. Is that blood? I swallowed hard, unsure. It looks like it, but it's dried. This must have been where the body was found. My fingers trembled as I reached out to touch the ground, but I stopped short, the horror of the situation crashing down on me. Suddenly, a noise echoed from the darkness, a soft scuffling sound that made both of us freeze. My heart raced, adrenaline coursing through my veins. Did you hear that? I whispered, my eyes darting around the alley. Yes, Laura replied, her voice trembling. What was it? Before I could respond, a shadow flickered at the edge of the alley, and my breath caught in my throat. We should go, I urged, fear tightening my chest. But curiosity gripped me. What if it was the figure the woman had mentioned? My mind was a battleground, the desire to flee warring against the need to confront whatever lurked in the dark. Let's just take a few more steps, I said, the words spilling out before I could think them through. We moved deeper into the alley, the shadows closing in around us. With every step, the unease grew, the air thick with a sense of foreboding. My heart pounded in my ears as I strained to listen. The scuffling sound came again, and this time it was closer, too close. Maybe we should call the police, Laura suggested, her voice quivering with fear. No, I replied, my voice firm. We need to see what's happening. If there's a chance we can identify the killer. Suddenly, a figure darted from the darkness, silhouetted against the weak glow of the streetlights. My breath hitched as I instinctively took a step back. Who's there? I called, trying to sound more confident than I felt. The figure paused, the faint light revealing a hooded face obscured by shadows. Get out of here, the person shouted, voice rough and urgent. You don't belong here. The command sent a chill through my spine. We're just looking for answers. I called back, my voice wavering. Answers? The figure scoffed, taking a step closer, revealing a face twisted with anger and fear. You're playing with fire. You think you can find the truth? You'll end up like him. My stomach dropped at the implication. Who are you? What do you know about the murder? I pressed, desperation fueling my words. But before they could respond, the sound of approaching footsteps echoed behind us. The figure's eyes widened in panic, and they turned to flee down the alley. Run, they yelled over their shoulder. Without thinking, I grabbed Laura's arm. We have to go, I urged, pulling her back toward the alley entrance. We sprinted, our hearts racing, the echo of our footsteps mingling with the sound of something, behind us. Bursting into the street, we didn't stop until we reached the safety of the coffee shop. The door swung shut behind us, the bell jingling nervously as we leaned against it, panting heavily. What just happened? Laura gasped, her eyes wide with terror. Who was that? I don't know, I admitted, my heart still pounding. But they knew something we need to find out. We shared a look that spoke volumes, fear, uncertainty, and a determination to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. The atmosphere in the coffee shop was thick with tension, but it was nothing compared to what awaited us outside. As we caught our breath, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. I glanced out the window, scanning the street, but it was empty, the streetlights flickering ominously. I turned back to Laura, my resolve hardening. We can't let this go. We have to dig deeper. We owe it to the victim and ourselves. But as I spoke, a shadow moved past the window, fleeting and indistinct. I felt a cold knot of fear tighten in my stomach. It was clear, whatever we were about to uncover might be more dangerous than we had anticipated. The realization hit me hard. We had stepped into a dark game, and the stakes were higher than we could ever have imagined. The coffee shop was a refuge, yet the warmth of the cafe felt like a thin veneer over the chilling reality outside. I took a seat at the corner table, my mind racing with questions as I stirred my cold cup of coffee. Laura sat across from me, her fingers tapping nervously against the table, mirroring my anxiety. We need to figure out who that person was, I said, the urgency of our situation sinking in. They must know something important about the murders. Laura nodded, her brow furrowed in concentration. But how do we find them? They could be dangerous. What if they were involved in the killings? I took a deep breath, trying to calm the storm of thoughts swirling in my mind. We can't assume that. They might be scared, just like us. We need to find a way to get information without putting ourselves in direct danger. Maybe we should talk to more people around here, Laura suggested. If that figure knew about the murders, there might be others who do too. We could even visit the local library or the community center. They might have records or information. Her idea sparked a flicker of hope within me. That's a great start. We can gather information about past incidents, see if there's any connection between the victims, and find out if others have seen anything suspicious. We finished our coffees, the clinking of cups and quiet chatter around us slowly dissolving the tension. With a sense of purpose, we left the shop, stepping into the brisk night air once more. The world outside felt charged, every shadow potentially hiding secrets we desperately needed to uncover. We headed toward the community center first. The building loomed ahead, its windows glowing with warm light. Inside, the atmosphere buzzed with activity, families gathered, children played, and laughter filled the hallways. It was a stark contrast to the fear that had settled over the city. Let's split up, I suggested, scanning the room for anyone who looked like they might have useful information. I'll talk to the staff, maybe they've heard something. Laura agreed, and we went our separate ways. I approached the front desk, where a middle-aged woman was sorting through papers. Excuse me, I said, trying to sound casual. I was wondering if you've had any reports of strange behavior or incidents in the area recently? The woman looked up, her brow furrowed. Strange behavior? With everything going on lately, we've had our share of concerned parents. People are on edge. Have you heard anything specific? I pressed. Maybe about someone acting suspiciously around the time of the murders? She hesitated, glancing around before lowering her voice. Well, I did hear a rumor from one of our volunteers. He mentioned seeing someone lurking near the park a few nights before the second murder. They said it felt off, you know? Like he didn't belong. Do you know who it was? I asked, my pulse quickening. No, I'm afraid not. Just that he wore a dark hoodie, same as many others around here. But the way he moved, like he was watching, waiting. I nodded, absorbing her words. Thank you. That's really helpful. As I turned to leave, I caught sight of Laura across the room, animatedly speaking with a small group of older patrons. I couldn't hear the specifics, but the expressions on their faces shifted from concern to intrigue. I felt a surge of curiosity about what they might be discussing. When she joined me a few minutes later, her eyes sparkled with excitement. You won't believe I just found out. What is it? I asked, leaning in closer. One of the women said she saw someone suspicious near the theater a week before the first murder. She thought he was a street performer at first, but there was something unsettling about him. He never interacted with anyone. Just watched. Watched? That's chilling, I said, feeling a chill run down my spine. It's like he was waiting for something to happen. Exactly. She said she thought it was odd, but didn't think much of it at the time. Now, she wonders if it was connected. As we walked back toward the exit, the air thickened with tension. The community center felt alive, but our thoughts were consumed by the dark shadows lurking just outside. Let's head to the library, I suggested. We can research the history of the area, any unsolved cases, and see if there's a pattern. The library was quiet when we arrived, the scent of old books and polished wood enveloping us like a comforting embrace. We moved through the aisles, scanning titles and searching for anything related to the recent murders or similar incidents. I pulled a few books on local history from the shelves and settled at a table near the back, where the soft glow of a desk lamp cast a warm light over the pages. Laura flipped through a few newspapers from the archives, her brow furrowing as she read through the articles. Hey, look at this, she called after a while, her voice low but urgent. There have been several missing persons cases reported over the last few years, but the police have closed most of them without leads. Really? I leaned closer, intrigued. What do they say? She scanned the article again. It mentions that many of the individuals disappeared without a trace. A couple of them were last seen near the park and the theater, places we've been. My heart raced. Do you think it's possible that the murders are connected to these disappearances? Maybe, Laura replied, her eyes narrowing in thought. It could be a serial killer preying on people who are vulnerable. If this person has been active for years, who knows how many lives they've affected? The weight of her words settled over me like a heavy fog. I knew we were onto something significant. We had to dig deeper. We spent hours combing through records, our excitement overshadowed by the dread of what we might uncover. Each new detail felt like another thread in a tapestry of horror that connected the past to the present. Finally, as we prepared to leave, I spotted a small flyer tacked to the bulletin board in the corner of the library. It read, "Community Watch Meeting, join us to discuss safety concerns in our neighborhood." Let's go, I said, a sense of urgency rising in me. We need to get involved, meet others who might have seen something, and build a network. Maybe we can uncover more leads. Laura nodded, determination shining in her eyes. We need to do this. If we want to stop this killer, we can't do it alone. As we stepped back into the night, a sense of purpose coursed through me. But even as we moved forward, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched, as if the shadows themselves were closing in, ready to pounce at any moment. The deeper we dug, the more aware I became that the darkness we were uncovering could easily consume us. The community meeting was scheduled for the following evening, and as I lay in bed that night, I felt a restless energy coursing through me. The information we had gathered weighed heavily on my mind, each detail adding to the growing tapestry of dread. I couldn't shake the feeling that time was running out. Morning arrived with a gray sky, thick clouds hanging low and casting an oppressive gloom over the city. I met Laura at our usual coffee shop, but today's atmosphere felt different, tense and heavy with anticipation. "I'm nervous about tonight," I admitted, stirring my coffee absent-mindedly. "What if we find out something we're not ready to handle?" "I know what you mean," Laura replied, her voice steady yet tinged with uncertainty. "But we need to push through. There are people out there who might have answers, and we can't afford to let fear stop us now." As the hours passed, the anticipation morphed into a restless energy. By the time we arrived at the community center that evening, a crowd had gathered, a mix of concerned citizens and curious onlookers. The room buzzed with murmurs, the air thick with a palpable sense of unease. We found a seat near the back, scanning the crowd for anyone who looked like they might have valuable information. The chair creaked beneath me, and I felt the knot of tension in my stomach tighten as the meeting began. The neighborhood watch leader, a tall man with graying hair and a serious expression, stood at the front. "Thank you all for coming. As many of you know, we're here to discuss the recent tragedies in our community and to explore ways we can protect ourselves and each other." His words resonated deeply within me. I exchanged glances with Laura, both of us fully aware that we were part of something bigger, a community grappling with fear. As the meeting progressed, various residents shared their concerns. One woman spoke about a strange man she'd seen wandering the park late at night, while another recounted a harrowing experience of feeling watched while jogging. Each account added to the suffocating atmosphere, a shared sense of vulnerability permeating the room. Then, an elderly man raised his hand. "I've lived here for over 50 years, he said, his voice quivering slightly. "In all my years, I've never seen this kind of fear take hold of our community. We can't let this continue. We need to take action." "What kind of action?" someone shouted from the back. "Vigilante justice," he replied, his eyes glinting with fervor. "If the police aren't doing enough, then we must protect ourselves. We should patrol the streets at night, keep an eye out for anyone suspicious." The room erupted in a mix of agreement and dissent. Some nodded enthusiastically, while others voiced their concerns about the potential danger of taking the law into their own hands. Laura and I exchanged worried glances. This wasn't a solution, it was a recipe for chaos. Just then, a tall figure stepped forward from the back of the room, drawing attention. "I understand your fear," the man said, his voice steady yet commanding. "But vigilante action could put you in greater danger. We need to work with law enforcement, not against them." He introduced himself as Officer Reynolds, a community liaison for the police department. His presence brought a wave of relief, yet unease lingered. "We're increasing patrols and looking into the recent incidents. We need your help, but we need it to be smart and organized." The crowd murmured in agreement, but I could sense the undercurrent of frustration. People wanted action, not just assurances. As the discussion continued, I noticed a shadowy figure lingering near the entrance. He wore a dark hoodie, his face obscured. I felt my heart race. Was it the same figure we'd seen before? The meeting wrapped up, and as we stepped outside, I felt an electric charge in the air. "Did you see that guy?" I asked Laura, gesturing toward the exit where the figure had stood. "Yeah, I did," she replied, a shiver running down her spine. Something about him felt off. It's like he was listening to every word. I didn't like the way he was watching us, I said, my unease deepening. Let's keep an eye out for him. I have a feeling he's connected to everything that's been happening. As we walked to the parking lot, I kept glancing over my shoulder. The streets were darker now, the streetlights casting eerie shadows that danced along the pavement. I could feel an unsettling presence behind us, as if someone were trailing us, watching our every move. Let's hurry, Laura urged, her voice tight with anxiety. I don't like being out here like this. We quickened our pace, the sounds of our footsteps echoing in the stillness. Just as we reached my car, I caught a glimpse of the figure again, lurking near the edge of the parking lot, his gaze fixed on us. My heart raced. Get in, I said, urgency flooding my voice. We climbed into the car, and I locked the doors, glancing out the window as the figure vanished into the shadows. I can't shake the feeling that he's been following us, I said, my voice shaking slightly. What if he's connected to the murders? Or what if he's just another scared person trying to figure things out? Laura suggested, her brow furrowing. We can't jump to conclusions, but we need to be cautious. Agreed, I replied, gripping the steering wheel tightly. We can't let our guard down. We're getting too close to something that could be dangerous. As I drove home, I replayed the events of the night in my mind. The stories we had heard, the figure lurking in the shadows, it all felt like pieces of a puzzle that we were desperately trying to assemble. Yet, the more we uncovered, the more I sensed that we were in deeper than we ever intended. That night, sleep eluded me. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, thoughts spiraling around the unknown. I could feel the darkness closing in, and I knew that the closer we got to the truth, the more danger we would face. The weight of our investigation pressed down on me, a reminder that in a city teetering on the edge of chaos, the most dangerous predator could be lurking in the shadows, watching and waiting. The next few days passed in a blur of anxiety and unease. The city felt more dangerous with each sunset, the shadows lengthening as if they were stretching toward me, waiting for an opportune moment to pounce. I replayed the events of the community meeting in my mind, the tension that had crackled in the air, and the sense that we were just scratching the surface of something far more sinister. Laura and I continued our investigation, following leads and interviewing anyone who might have seen something suspicious. Each new piece of information we gathered only added to the weight of our findings. It seemed as if every alleyway and street corner held secrets we were determined to uncover. One night, we decided to revisit the park, a central location in our investigation and a site that felt haunted by the weight of the recent tragedies. The trees loomed like sentinels, their branches swaying in the wind, casting eerie shadows on the ground. The moon hung high in the sky, illuminating the path ahead but doing little to ease the unease creeping up my spine. I feel like we're walking into a trap, Laura said, her voice barely above a whisper. It's too quiet here. Where is everyone? Maybe they're afraid, I replied, scanning the dimly lit paths. Or maybe they're just avoiding this place. It feels different now, charged with fear. As we walked deeper into the park, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. I glanced over my shoulder frequently, half expecting to see that shadowy figure again. What if we actually find something tonight? Laura said, her eyes wide with a mix of hope and dread. What if we see that guy again? Then we'll be ready, I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. We just need to keep our distance and observe. No confrontation unless we have to. We continued down a familiar path, the crunch of gravel underfoot echoing in the stillness. I led the way, my heart pounding in my chest. Suddenly, Laura grabbed my arm, her grip tight. Did you hear that? I paused, straining to listen. A faint rustling sound broke the silence, followed by a low murmur that sent chills down my spine. Let's go check it out, I suggested, but my voice wavered with uncertainty. We approached the source of the sound, our footsteps soft and deliberate. As we turned a corner, the moonlight revealed a small clearing where a group of teenagers gathered around a fire pit. They laughed and joked, oblivious to the tension that hung in the air like a thick fog. Relief washed over me momentarily, but it was short-lived. As I turned to walk away, my gaze caught movement in the shadows beyond the clearing. A figure stood there, half hidden behind a tree, watching us intently. My heart raced again. "Laura, look," I whispered, nodding toward the figure. She followed my gaze, her eyes widening as we both took a step back, trying to remain unseen. "Do you think it's him?" she breathed, her voice trembling slightly. "Could be," I said, my throat dry. "We should." Before I could finish my sentence, the figure stepped into the moonlight. It was the same man we had seen at the community meeting. The hood still obscured his face, but the glint of his eyes sent a wave of panic through me. He was closer now, and the air felt thick with dread. "Run!" I shouted, grabbing Laura's hand and pulling her back the way we came. We sprinted down the path, the sound of our footsteps pounding against the ground echoed in the stillness. My heart raced as adrenaline surged through my veins. Behind us, I heard the rustle of movement, the heavy thud of footsteps following us. "Faster!" I urged, feeling the presence of the man closing in. The shadows shifted, the trees looming like giants, and the darkness felt alive, eager to swallow us whole. We reached the park exit, the streetlights flickering to life as we burst into the main road. I glanced over my shoulder, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The figure had stopped at the edge of the park, a dark silhouette against the trees, watching us with an unsettling stillness. "Did we lose him?" Laura asked, her voice shaking as we stumbled away from the park. "I don't know," I replied, adrenaline still coursing through me. "But we need to get somewhere safe." We hurried to my car, fumbling with the keys in my shaking hands. As the engine roared to life, I glanced back at the park one last time. The figure was gone, but the sense of dread lingered like a cold shadow. "Where to now?" Laura asked, her eyes wide with fear. "We need to find the police," I said, determination replacing the panic. "We have to report what we saw. If he's been watching us, he could be dangerous." We drove through the dimly lit streets, the weight of our fear pressing down on us. My mind raced with thoughts of what we had uncovered and the implications of the figure stalking us. It felt like we were being drawn deeper into a web of darkness that threatened to consume us. When we reached the police station, a sense of urgency propelled us forward. Inside, the fluorescent lights flickered, casting an unnatural glow over the waiting area. We approached the front desk, where an officer looked up, a weary expression on his face. "What can I help you with?" he asked, clearly weary from a long shift. "We need to report something urgent," I said, my voice steady despite the adrenaline still pulsing through me. "We believe we've seen the man connected to the murders." The officer's interest peaked as he leaned forward. "What do you mean?" "We were just at the park," I explained, urgency creeping into my tone. "We saw him watching us. He's been following us. We think he's dangerous." "Okay, let's take this to an interview room," the officer said, rising from his chair. "I'll need you to give me all the details." As we walked through the sterile corridors of the station, I felt a mix of fear and hope. Maybe, just maybe, we were finally on the right path to unraveling the mystery. But even as I felt a flicker of optimism, I couldn't shake the feeling that the darkness was closing in and we were standing at the precipice of something far more terrifying than we could ever imagine. The interview room was stark, with bare walls and a single flickering light overhead. I took a deep breath, feeling the adrenaline from our narrow escape begin to ebb, replaced by a profound sense of urgency. Laura and I sat across from the officer, a middle-aged man with a serious demeanor named Officer Reynolds. "Tell me everything you saw," he said, pulling out a notepad and clicking his pen. His gaze was steady, focused, and I felt an inkling of hope. Maybe he could help us. I began recounting the events of the past few days, starting with the community meeting. "We've been investigating the murders," I said, glancing at Laura for support. "We've talked to people, trying to gather any leads we could find. Tonight, we went to the park, and that's when we saw him, the man in the hoodie." Officer Reynolds nodded, his pen moving quickly across the page as he scribbled down notes. "What did he look like?" "He was tall, but it was hard to see his face," I said, frustration creeping in. "He just lurked in the shadows. It felt like he was waiting for something. Or someone." Laura chimed in, her voice steadying as she spoke. "He was definitely watching us. There was something in his eyes. It felt predatory." Reynolds looked up, his expression shifting. "Did you feel threatened at any point? Did he approach you?" "Yes," I exclaimed, my heart racing again at the memory. "When we realized he was following us, we ran. We thought we were in danger." The officer leaned back, contemplating our words. "And you're sure this is the same man linked to the murders?" "I'm not sure, but he felt connected," I replied, the weight of the situation settling heavily on my chest. "It's like he's part of this twisted puzzle we're trying to piece together." Reynolds paused, glancing at his notes before looking back at us. "You mentioned talking to people in the community. Did anyone else mention seeing this man? Any reports or descriptions?" I shook my head, feeling a pang of disappointment. "No, but people are scared. They're keeping to themselves. It's like this fear has cast a shadow over the whole neighborhood. Fear does strange things to people," he mused. "It makes them reluctant to speak up. But we need to make this fear known. If this man is stalking you, we can't let it continue." Laura and I exchanged glances, sensing the gravity of the situation. Reynolds continued, "I'll need to inform my superiors. We can increase patrols in the area, but I need you both to stay vigilant. If you see him again, call us immediately. Don't engage, just get somewhere safe." "Of course," I said, relief flooding through me. "We will." As we left the station, the weight of our encounter with Officer Reynolds lingered. The air felt different outside, cooler and heavier, as if the city was holding its breath. We climbed into my car, and I glanced over at Laura, who appeared deep in thought. "What are you thinking?" I asked, trying to gauge her mood. I can't shake this feeling," she replied, biting her lip. "What if we're getting too close? What if we're next on his list?" "Don't say that," I said firmly, starting the engine. "We can't let fear dictate our actions. We need to find out what's really going on, even if it's dangerous." Driving through the city felt different that night. The streets were empty, the usual bustle of life replaced by an unsettling quiet. I kept my eyes peeled, scanning for any sign of the figure that had haunted us. The streetlights flickered ominously, casting eerie shadows that danced along the pavement, making it hard to shake the feeling that we were not alone. As we approached Laura's apartment, I parked outside and turned to her. "Are you going to be okay?" I asked, concern flooding my voice. "I think so," she replied, though her eyes betrayed her anxiety. "I'll lock all the doors and keep the lights on. I just wish I could shake this feeling of being watched." "Text me when you get inside," I said, forcing a reassuring smile. "I'll be fine. Just need to clear my head." She nodded, stepping out of the car. I watched her walk inside, the warm glow of the lights spilling out from the doorway, but I couldn't shake the feeling of foreboding that clung to the air. After a few moments, I pulled away from the curb, my heart heavy with unease. I drove around the block, deciding to do a loop around the area. If there was any chance that figure was still around, I wanted to be ready. As I navigated the streets, I replayed everything that had happened, the community meeting, the encounter in the park, and the conversation with Officer Reynolds. Each moment was like a piece of a larger puzzle, but the picture remained shrouded in darkness. After a while, I turned onto a quieter street, a neighborhood I wasn't familiar with. It felt desolate, the houses standing in stark silence against the backdrop of the night. I slowed down, taking in the surroundings when suddenly a flash of movement caught my eye. There it was, a figure in a dark hoodie, standing on the corner, seemingly watching me. My heart dropped into my stomach. "Not again," I whispered under my breath, gripping the steering wheel tightly. I slowed the car to a stop, my instinct screaming at me to turn around, but curiosity held me in place. This couldn't be a coincidence. The figure began to move, stepping closer to the streetlight, revealing just enough of his face for me to feel my blood run cold. It was him, the man who had been stalking us. I fumbled for my phone, ready to call Laura, but in that moment, the figure seemed to sense my gaze. He froze, locking eyes with me. For a split second, time stood still, and I felt a surge of adrenaline mixed with sheer terror. I slammed my foot on the gas, peeling away from the curb, my heart racing as I tore through the quiet streets. I could feel his gaze on me, a chilling reminder that danger was lurking just out of sight. I drove without direction, panic consuming me as I navigated the winding roads. My mind raced with questions. Why was he following me? What did he want? Eventually, I pulled over in a dimly lit parking lot, the car shaking slightly as I tried to regain my composure. I took deep breaths, willing my heart to slow down. I had to think clearly. I couldn't let fear cloud my judgment. Reaching for my phone, I dialed Laura's number, the tension in my chest rising with each ring. "Come on, pick up," I urged, my fingers trembling. Finally, she answered, her voice shaky. "Hello?" "It's me," I said, my heart racing. "I think he's following me. I just saw him." "What? Are you okay?" she asked, panic creeping into her voice. "Where are you?" "I don't know, some parking lot. Just stay inside and lock the doors." "I'll figure this out," I said, trying to sound braver than I felt. "Please be careful," she said, her concern palpable. "I will," I promised before hanging up. As I sat in the dark parking lot, my thoughts spiraled out of control. I was scared, and it was only growing worse. I needed to find a way to turn the tables, to confront this fear head-on before it consumed me. Glancing in the rearview mirror, I strained to see if the figure was still behind me. The parking lot was empty, but I could feel the weight of his presence lurking just beyond the edges of my consciousness. In that moment, I made a decision. I couldn't run anymore. I had to confront whatever lay ahead. I was already knee-deep in this horror, There was no turning back now. The cold metal of the steering wheel felt reassuring as I took a few deep breaths, trying to calm the storm of emotions raging within me. The shadows danced ominously around the parking lot, and with each passing second, the sense of dread grew heavier, wrapping around me like a suffocating blanket. I glanced at the dashboard clock. It was nearly midnight. I knew I needed to make a choice, either continue to run, living in constant fear, or confront this nightmare head-on. I opted for the latter, the flame of determination flickering inside me, pushing me forward despite the fear clawing at my insides. I pulled out my phone again, the light casting a faint glow across the dark interior of the car. I debated for a moment, should I call Officer Reynolds, or should I go back to Laura? But deep down, I knew I had to face the man who had turned our lives upside down. Running to the police felt like a retreat, and I was done retreating. With a deep breath, I started the engine and navigated back onto the main road. My eyes darted around, searching for any sign of him, the looming figure that had haunted me. Every shadow seemed to shift, every streetlight flickered ominously, and I felt as if the very city was conspiring against me. As I drove, a plan began to form in my mind. If he was watching me, then I needed to find a way to turn that observation into something productive. I would lead him somewhere public, somewhere the police could apprehend him, and then I could finally put an end to this torment. I decided to head toward the old railway station, a sprawling complex on the outskirts of town. It had been abandoned for years, a relic of the past, and I remembered it as a place where we used to play as kids, filled with memories that now felt warped in the face of my current reality. The surrounding area was deserted, and I hoped the lack of witnesses would ensure a confrontation without unwanted eyes. As I drove closer, the overgrown weeds and rusted tracks loomed ahead, casting an eerie silhouette against the moonlit sky. I parked my car at the edge of the lot, taking a moment to gather my thoughts before stepping out. The night air was thick with tension, and the distant sound of rustling leaves felt like the city's warning bell. My heart pounded as I walked toward the entrance, the sound of my footsteps echoing off the crumbling brick walls. I had to remain composed. Fear was my enemy now, and I couldn't let it overwhelm me. I reached the entrance, pushing open the creaky door, the sound reverberating like a gunshot in the stillness. Inside, the shadows enveloped me. The space felt suffocating, each corner obscured in darkness. I took a few cautious steps, the musty smell of decay filling my nostrils. The station was a graveyard of memories, and now it seemed like the perfect place to confront my own demons. Suddenly, I heard it, a soft thud behind me. I whipped around, my heart racing. "Is anyone there?" I called out, my voice echoing eerily against the cold stone. Silence hung heavy in the air, thick and suffocating. "Come on, show yourself," I demanded, my voice more assertive than I felt. Then, I saw him, standing just inside the shadows, the man in the hoodie. His presence felt like a chill running down my spine, his face obscured but his eyes glinting like daggers in the dark. I could feel the fear pooling in my stomach, but I forced myself to remain grounded. "Why are you doing this?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady, the question echoing through the vast emptiness. "What do you want from me?" He didn't respond immediately. Instead, he stepped forward, his movements fluid and deliberate, almost as if he was savoring the moment. "You're getting too close," he finally said, his voice low and raspy. It sent a shiver down my spine. "You should have stopped while you could." "Why? Why the murders?" I pressed, anger rising within me. "You think this will get you what you want? People are terrified." "It's not about fear," he replied, his tone almost detached. It's about control. People like you need to learn their place. His words hung in the air, thick with menace. It was chilling, the way he spoke, as if he were imparting wisdom rather than confessing to the darkness that lay within him. Is this what you want? I challenged, adrenaline pumping through my veins. To instill terror in everyone? To feel powerful? What happened to you? His expression darkened, and for a moment I thought I saw a flicker of something human in his eyes, a flash of pain, perhaps, but it was quickly replaced by a cold, hard resolve. You wouldn't understand. This city belongs to me, and I decide who gets to walk its streets. With that, he lunged forward, his movements quick and unpredictable. I barely had time to react, instinct kicking in as I darted to the side, narrowly avoiding his grasp. The adrenaline surged, sharpening my senses as I sprinted deeper into the station, the sound of my footsteps echoing like a drumbeat against the walls. I could hear him behind me, his breath heavy with determination as he pursued me through the darkened hallways. I stumbled into an open area, a vast room filled with rusty old train cars, the air thick with the scent of iron and decay. The shadows seemed to thicken around me as I ducked behind one of the train cars, my heart pounding in my chest. I could hear him moving closer, the sound of his footsteps echoing ominously. I pressed myself against the cold metal, trying to steady my breath, willing myself not to panic. My mind raced. I needed to find a way to turn the tables. I could hear him moving closer, the rustling of his clothes growing louder. My eyes darted around, searching for something, anything, that could give me an advantage. Just then, I noticed a heavy metal rod lying on the ground nearby, likely left behind by some previous visitor. Grabbing it, I felt a surge of determination. I was done running. If this was my chance to confront him, to stand my ground, I would take it. As he approached, I could see the outline of his figure through the shadows, his hood still pulled low over his face. The tension crackled in the air as I steeled myself, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Come out, wherever you are," he taunted, a twisted smile evident in his voice. "This isn't a game, you know." Taking a deep breath, I stepped out from behind the train car, gripping the rod tightly. "I'm not afraid of you anymore," I shouted, my voice echoing defiantly in the cavernous space. He stopped, surprise flickering across his features. "You think you can fight me?" he sneered, stepping closer. "You're just a scared little boy playing hero." With a surge of adrenaline, I swung the metal rod toward him, aiming for his midsection. He barely dodged it, the rod missing him by inches as he lunged back, momentarily caught off guard. But he recovered quickly, anger flaring in his eyes as he charged at me. The next moments felt like a blur, a chaotic dance of survival as we grappled in the shadows of the train yard. He was stronger than I anticipated, and the force of his movement sent shockwaves through me. I struggled against him, adrenaline coursing through my veins as I fought to regain my footing. "Why are you doing this?" I shouted, desperation tinging my voice. "Because I can," he hissed, his eyes glinting with a wild intensity. "And because you're too weak to stop me." As we struggled, I could feel my resolve hardening. I wasn't going to let him win. With a sudden burst of strength, I pushed him back, creating a small distance between us. I took a deep breath, my heart racing as I prepared for another strike. But before I could react, he lunged at me again, and in that moment, everything felt surreal. I twisted out of the way just in time, his hand brushing against my shoulder. I swung the rod again, this time connecting with his side. He grunted, stumbling back but regaining his footing quickly. "You'll regret this," he spat, anger igniting in his eyes as he lunged again. I dodged again, but this time I didn't see the edge of a train car behind me. My foot caught on the jagged edge, and I fell backward, hitting the cold ground hard. Pain shot through my body, but I barely had time to register it before he was on me, looming over me like a dark cloud. In that moment of vulnerability, a sense of despair washed over me. This was it. Would I really let him in my story here? But as I lay there, something deep inside me ignited a fierce determination to survive. I needed to fight back, to claw my way out of this darkness. Gathering every ounce of strength, I kicked up hard, catching him off guard. The force of my movement sent him stumbling backward, giving me a fleeting chance to scramble to my feet. I was on unsteady legs, my heart pounding as I looked around, desperate for anything I could use to defend myself. My eyes landed on a discarded flare gun lying in the shadows, likely forgotten by someone exploring the area. I lunged for it, grasping it tightly as I turned to face him. "Stay back," I yelled, raising the flare gun, the bright color a stark contrast to the dark surroundings. The moment was surreal, the tension in the air palpable. He paused, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his face as he assessed the situation. "You think that will stop me?" he challenged, but I could see the hesitation in his eyes. "I won't let you hurt anyone else," I shouted, feeling the surge of adrenaline as I pulled the trigger. The flare shot out with a bright, blinding light, illuminating the darkness around us. The sudden brightness engulfed him, and he stumbled back, shielding his eyes. In that brief moment of distraction, I took the opportunity to escape, running toward the entrance where I had entered. The flare sputtered and burned brightly behind me, casting an eerie glow on the decaying walls as I sprinted through the opening, my heart racing with each step. I could hear him shouting behind me, but I refused to look back. Bursting out into the cool night air, I didn't stop running until I reached my car. I fumbled for my keys, my hands shaking as I tried to unlock the door. I glanced back at the station, my heart pounding with fear and adrenaline. I didn't wait to see if he followed. I jumped inside and locked the doors, starting the engine with trembling hands. As I pulled away, the flare flickered behind me, a beacon of light illuminating the darkness, and I felt a strange mix of triumph and terror. I had confronted the monster that had haunted me, but I knew this was far from over. He wouldn't let me go easily. As I drove away from the station, my mind raced with thoughts of what would come next. I couldn't hide anymore. I needed to find a way to end this, to protect Laura and myself. The night stretched before me like an endless road, each passing moment a reminder that I was not yet free. But as I drove, I felt a flicker of hope amid the fear. Perhaps, just perhaps, I could find a way to turn the tide in this battle of shadows. As I sped away from the abandoned railway station, my heart raced in sync with the thudding engine beneath me. The bright light of the flare still burned in my mind, illuminating the darkness of that place and the shadow that had haunted me for far too long. But while the flare's light faded, the danger was far from extinguished. I could still hear his taunting words echoing in my head. "You think you can escape me?" Panic surged through me, and I gripped the steering wheel tighter, knuckles white against the cold metal. I had to outsmart him. I couldn't afford to be a victim any longer. With each passing second, I devised a plan, my thoughts racing as fast as the car on the empty road. First, I needed to warn Laura. I reached for my phone, but the thought of calling her made my stomach knot. I didn't want to scare her, yet the fear of putting her in danger was overwhelming. After everything that had happened, I couldn't let her be a target. I had to find a way to protect her and confront him once and for all. I decided to head back to my apartment, knowing it was the only place where I could gather my thoughts and perhaps even formulate a plan. As I turned the corner into my neighborhood, the streetlights flickered eerily, casting long shadows across the pavement. The air felt thick with an unsettling stillness, and I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Reaching my building, I parked hastily and rushed inside, glancing over my shoulder as I entered the stairwell. Each creak of the old building echoed ominously, amplifying my fear. I bolted up the stairs, the familiar surroundings now feeling alien and menacing. Inside my apartment, I quickly locked the door, taking a moment to catch my breath. The space felt suffocating, the walls closing in as I paced back and forth. I could still hear his voice, cold and mocking, and I shivered at the thought of what he was capable of. I took a moment to gather my thoughts and sat down at my kitchen table, my mind racing through everything that had happened. I grabbed a notepad, scribbling down what I knew about him, the details, the patterns, anything that could help me piece together the puzzle of his madness. My phone buzzed on the table, and I nearly jumped out of my skin. I snatched it up, my heart racing as I saw Laura's name on the screen. "Hey, I just saw the news. Are you okay?" she asked, her voice laced with concern. "I'm fine, but I need you to listen to me carefully," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "There's something dangerous going on. You need to stay home, lock the doors, and don't let anyone in, even if it's me." "What? Why? What's happening?" she pressed, fear creeping into her voice. "There's a man. He's been following me. I can't explain it all right now, but I promise I'll be safe," I assured her, trying to calm her rising panic. "Please, just be careful." "I'm worried about you," she said softly, and I could hear the tremor in her voice. "I will. Just trust me," I replied before hanging up. I leaned against the table, my heart pounding. I needed a plan, and I needed to confront this monster before he could make a move on Laura. I rummaged through my drawers, gathering supplies, a flashlight, a baseball bat, and my trusty old pocket knife. I could feel the weight of the knife in my hand, a reminder that I wasn't defenseless. I wasn't going to let fear paralyze me anymore. Suddenly, a loud thud echoed from the front door, jolting me out of my thoughts. My heart leapt into my throat, and I froze, straining to listen. Another thud, followed by the sound of something scraping against the door. Panic surged through me, and I felt the adrenaline kick in again. I had to act fast. I grabbed the bat and positioned myself beside the door, my heart racing as I took a deep breath, steadying my nerves. The thudding continued, growing more insistent, and I could hear a muffled voice calling out, "Let me in. I know you're there." It was him. My blood ran cold. He had found me. I took a step back, ready to defend myself. "Go away," I shouted, my voice steady but trembling inside. "I'm calling the police." "Come on, don't make this harder than it has to be," he replied, the casual menace in his voice sending chills down my spine. "Let me in, and we can talk." "Talk?" I scoffed, my grip tightening around the bat. "You've done enough talking. I'm not letting you in." There was a moment of silence, and I could hear him breathing outside the door. "You think you can fight me?" he taunted. "You're just a scared little boy hiding in your apartment. It's only a matter of time before I get in." I felt a surge of anger at his words, and with it came a wave of determination. "You can't intimidate me anymore. I'm done running." There was a pause, and then he laughed, a chilling sound that echoed through the door. "Oh, I can't wait to see you try." Without warning, He kicked the door, but with splintering under the force. I stumbled back, fear gripping me as I braced myself. I had to make a stand, and I had to do it now. As he kicked the door again, I raised the bat, ready to swing. The door shuddered, but I held my ground, my heart pounding like a drum in my chest. I could hear him muttering angrily outside, and I took a deep breath, focusing on the moment. "Come on, just a little closer," I whispered to myself, adrenaline coursing through my veins. Then he kicked the door one last time, and it flew open, crashing against the wall with a loud bang. He stood there, silhouetted against the dim light of the hallway, his head casting shadows over his face. "You really thought you could keep me out?" he sneered, stepping forward. In an instant, I swung the bat with all my might, connecting with his midsection. He grunted in surprise, doubling over as the impact knocked him off balance. Before he could recover, I rushed forward, pushing him back, but he grabbed my wrist, his grip like iron. We struggled for a moment, the two of us locked in a desperate dance of survival. "Stop fighting, you idiot," he spat, his eyes wild with anger. "You don't know what you're getting into. Let go of me," I shouted, twisting my wrist to break free. With a surge of adrenaline, I brought the bat down again, this time connecting with his shoulder. He stumbled back, momentarily disoriented, and I seized the opportunity to dart past him into the hallway. I could hear him cursing behind me, and I sprinted down the stairs, heart racing with each step. I burst through the building's entrance and into the cool night air, my breath coming in quick gasps. I knew I couldn't go home. I had to get to safety, and the nearest police station was my best bet. I sprinted down the street, the sound of footsteps echoing behind me. He was gaining on me, and I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, the fear threatening to overwhelm me. Just ahead, I saw the flickering lights of a convenience store, a haven of light in the dark night. Without hesitation, I dashed toward it, pushing through the door and gasping for breath as I stumbled inside. "Help! Someone help me!" I shouted, scanning the store for anyone who could assist. The cashier looked up, startled by my sudden entrance. "What's going on?" he asked, eyes wide. "He's coming. There's a man after me," I cried, glancing back at the door. The bell chimed, and I knew he was right behind me. The cashier grabbed his phone, ready to call for help, but I couldn't wait. I turned back to the door, my heart racing. I couldn't let him in. As the door swung open, I saw him standing there, his expression twisted in rage. "You think you can escape me?" he shouted, his voice laced with madness. But I was done being the prey. I grabbed a nearby bottle of soda and hurled it at him, catching him off guard. The glass shattered against the floor, and for a moment, he hesitated. "Get back!" I yelled, standing my ground as he stepped inside the store. He lunged toward me, but I quickly moved to the side, dodging his grasp. "Call the police!" I shouted to the cashier as I ducked behind the counter, searching for something, anything to defend myself. I spotted a heavy canister of flour and grabbed it, my mind racing as I prepared for his next move. "You think you can hide?" he taunted, advancing slowly. "I'll find you, no matter where you go." As he reached the counter, I tossed the canister at him, the flour exploding in a cloud of white dust. He coughed and sputtered, momentarily blinded, and I seized the opportunity to dart toward the door. "Help! Someone help!" I shouted again, bursting outside. I could hear the sirens in the distance, and hope surged within me. I dashed toward the sound, my lungs burning as I pushed through the night. I had to reach them before he caught up. Just as I turned the corner, I spotted the flashing lights of a police car, the officers stepping out with their hands on their weapons. "Hey! What's going on?" one of them shouted as I approached, breathless and frantic. "There's a man. He's trying to kill me," I gasped, pointing back toward the store. The officers exchanged glances, and without hesitation, they rushed toward the entrance, ready to confront the threat. "Stay behind us," one officer called as they entered the store, leading me in the safety of their car. I leaned against it, trying to catch my breath, my heart racing with adrenaline. Moments felt like hours as I waited, fear and anticipation swirling in my gut. But finally, the officers emerged, a firm grip on the man who had tormented me for so long. He was handcuffed and scowling, the fury in his eyes a stark contrast to the calm confidence he had once exuded. "This isn't over," he spat, glaring at me. I felt a shiver run down my spine, but I held my ground, facing him without fear. "You won't hurt anyone again," I replied, my voice steady. The officers led him away, and I stood there, feeling a wave of relief wash over me. I had faced my nightmare and survived. But as the adrenaline faded, the weight of the experience settled in. I knew I would carry the scars of this night with me, a reminder of the darkness that lurked just beneath the surface of my life. I turned to the officers, gratitude filling me. "Thank you," I whispered, knowing I had escaped, but the psychological battle was far from over. I would need time to heal, to process everything that had happened. But for now, I was free, and I would do everything in my power to ensure I stayed that way. As I watched the police car drive away, I felt a flicker of hope amidst the darkness. I had faced the monster and lived to tell the tale. And while I knew that the shadows would always be a part of me, I was determined to reclaim my life, one day at a time. Hope your dreams are filled with fear. Good night.